This is the story of Roque José Florencio, known as Pata Seca, forced to produce over 200 children for his master. It's a true story, it's not a legend, says Maria Magdalena Florencio Florentino while holding her grandfather's photo. Pata Seca was born in 1828 and bought by a farmer from São Carlos to be a slave breeder. He earned the name and surname of Pata Seca because of his long, thin hands. He was tall. He was 2.18 meters, 7 feet 2 inches. And at the time, it was believed that men with thin shins would have male children. He was chosen to lie with the female slaves and generate more slaves for labor. His other responsibilities were taking care of the horses and transporting correspondence between the farm and the city. For 350 years, slavery was the core of Brazil's economy. Slaves were so crucial to the economy that they did all the work and Brazilians did nothing. Brazil's slavery was abolished in 1850, but the demand for slaves was high. Slaves needed to be produced, or the economy would collapse. To get more slaves, enslaved Africans were forced to procreate. This slave breeding system worked as a factory. The babies were born as slaves, so they could work on plantations or as free laborers. His granddaughter, Maria Magdalena Florencio Florentino, is seen holding her grandfather's death certificate in one of the local newspapers. The document, drawn up on February 17, 1958, indicates that Roque died of heart failure, myocarditis, sclerosis, and senility. The number of children was counted in an old book of the Fazenda Grande, but the family says they have no birth certificates and are looking for their offspring on social networks. Here is how it all started. Roque José Florencio was born in 1828 in Sorocaba, São Paulo, when Brazil was still a Portuguese colony. As you might have already guessed, slavery was still going strong. Roque was a powerful man with a muscular physique, but he too was one of the unfortunate ones who got enslaved. There is no record of his parents or siblings. They were separated at a very young age. His owner forced him to work as a field laborer and a slave breeder because he was very strong and tall. People called him Pata Seca, which means dry foot in Portuguese. There are different speculations as to where he got that nickname. The family tells us that Pata Seca was bought in Vila Sorocaba and sold to Visconde da Cunha Bueno, owner of a latifundio plantation focused on coffee production. At that time, a popular superstition was that a tall and robust man could father more male babies. Male slaves were critical for hard labor, and because Pata Seca was enslaved, he had no choice then to do as his owner said, and impregnate countless female slaves. These children would then be sold as commodities on the slave market. Children born into these relationships were kept under the watchful eyes of their masters. The masters often took the children away from these women and used them at first as servants for domestic chores, and later, many would be used as slave breeders. Pata Seca was fed well and received health checks to become the perfect breeding tool. According to his family, he fathered 249 children. Because he could produce so many children, his owners treated him well. Even though Pata Seca suffered as a slave, he still loved his kids. He thought them essential skills. Pata Seca took care of the horses and was responsible for transporting correspondence between the farm and the city. It was then, while working as a courier, he met his wife. He was going to get the letters in São Carlos, and when he passed, he saw a thin girl sweeping. One day he asked for the girl's hand in marriage, and when she said yes, he put the girl on the saddle and headed for the farm. The wedding was celebrated, and Pata Seca received 20 bushels of land from his bosses. He decided to create his own family with Palmira, with whom he had 9 more children. There's not much information about Palmira, except that she was a healer and took care of the sick. Pata Seca was liked by locals. He was religious and used to hold parties in honor of São João, St. John, always receiving the guests well. Magdalena also keeps memories of her grandfather and doesn't hide her pride in talking about him. As a child, she remembers Pata Seca always in a white shirt and upright posture. Pata Seca made a point of sweeping around the house of the farm, surrounded by mango trees, and that the coffee was prepared by Uncle Zé. Pata Seca's usual breakfast was cornmeal scrambled in the pan with lard and black coffee, and brought the coffee to Palmira, who went blind after complications in one of the births. At lunch, he used to eat rice and beans with torresmo, pork rinds, or chicken. To sleep, he would lay on a cot bed with mattress of corn straw. It was from this bed that the nail fell that injured their grandfather's foot. He got a screw worm. They used medicine from the senzala, smoke, urine, and alcohol, and a girl took care of it, but she traveled to Rio Preto, and it got worse, said Madalena. Pata Seca was taken to Santa Casa de São Carlos. Roque died in February 1958 at the age of 130, just 3 months after attending the city's birthday parade as the oldest man in the county. The only photo of the patriarch is from this parade and was found after years of searching. Madalena discovered that an old friend of her grandfather had the image, and after several searches, relatives of this gentleman found the portrait in his wallet. Today, the image is on the shelf of Madalena's house, right in front of anyone entering the room. There are also souvenirs behind the door, where she keeps the old house keys and a nail like the one that fell on her grandfather's feet, and in the kitchen, following the same recipe to produce rapadura. For her grandfather lived a long time because, unlike other slaves, he lived in the Casa Grande, big house, and could eat better. Her research continues. She goes on searching for information and says that before dying she intends to donate Pata Seca's memories to a museum. I am very happy, very proud to tell my grandfather's story, says Madalena.